We're going to get started. What a great crew tonight. So good to see everybody. Thank you. Welcome to PechaKucha Volume 41. I am Kirsten Isgro. I will be your MC for the evening, and I have been part of this crew for about 7 or 8 years. I'm going to introduce the rest of my PechaKucha crew. We're all volunteers. This is a passion project for us. We have Michael over here. We have Heather with the fancy skirt, Joel, Adam, and Karen in the back corner. We have been, this is a passion project, and welcome. I'm really curious. Before we get started, sorry, we're kind of going green, trying to go green. The program is on this QR code. We also have a couple of these out in the lobby if you want to pick those up. And I will introduce each of our speakers as they come up. So I'll give you a moment to log that. Is it working? You getting it? Good. Excellent. All right. So I'm really curious. We ask this every time. How many of you, this is your first time you've been at a PechaKucha? Yay! I love that. I love that. Excellent. Great. So for those of you that have come before, sorry if this is redundant, but it's always really nice to kind of orient folks. Do we want to lower the lights, Adam, or are we good for now? This is it? All right, excellent. Great, that's good, good. All right, so the history of this is in 2003, there were some architects, Astrid Klein and Mark Dytham, and they live in Tokyo. They had an architectural firm, I think they still do, and they found that architects could be a little long-winded about their projects. And so they came up with this plan. You know, architects have fabulous, fantastic drawings and ideas, and what if you only had 20 slides to show those ideas, and each of those slides were only 20 seconds. Thus, the 6 minutes and 40-second rule. So we've got 20 slides, 20 seconds. This particular format has proven to be very, very concise. It forces you to get to the point right away. As it has evolved, it's not just for architects or artists. People use this at conferences. Teachers such as myself use it to get students to come to their point quickly. And we here in Burlington have been doing this particular PechaKucha since 2015. And so it originally started with the Fleming and the Burlington City Arts and Shelburne Museum and Echo. And since then, we've had sort of a relaunch, kind of stumbled through COVID. And as I said, this is a volunteer effort, and we're just really, really excited to bring people together. We've had a number of presenters. We did have, for quite a while, when it wasn't in those 4 circuits where I just talked about at BCA and Fleming and Echo and Shelburne Museum, we were at the Flynn for a while, and now we're at this space. We're really happy with this space, so we do want to thank Main Street Landing. We feel like the visual lines are better. We worked on the sound for those of you that were here a couple volumes ago, so hopefully everyone can hear well. And really for us, this project, again, it's passion. When you're not pitching anything, you're really sharing your passions. We all have our weird little hobbies and passions, and that's the beauty of diversity, right? And so again, thank you for just being part of this process. It feels incredibly important at this moment in time. You'll see a lot of swag. This whole idea of sharing your story is generating this global community. We've got 140 countries that do PechaKucha. We have over 1,300 cities that host PechaKucha. And PechaKucha is Japanese for chit chat. So there you go. That's what it is. So when you're like, how do you say that? That's what it is. So one of the things that we always like to sort of stage things. Things are a little rough right now. I don't know if you all noticed. And this is our moment for joy, right? There's this fantastic cartoonist illustrator that I've been following, and I think his stuff is quite lovely. His name is Vincent Rose Barraza, and this is a little bit like what I was feeling in May and March and January, right? And for me, part of why I love being part of this volunteer project is that there is something quite joyful to have people stand up here and tell us about their lives, their hobbies, their passions. And, oh, we did, back for a second. Yeah, so part of this idea, and this is a Toy, the poet Toy Darabont, that joy is a form of resistance. And so that's our theme for tonight, is joy. We have some amazing presenters. The first half is really going to be focusing on exploration, and then we've got some travel in there. Like, where do you find joy? If you've been paying attention to the news, there was some fantastic forms of resistance yesterday in Portland, Oregon, where people were dressed up in giant dinosaur and furry costumes and tormenting various people that were not so happy about free expression. We did not include that, but you can Google it when you go home. It's really funny watching little dinosaurs harassing various ICE folks. Okay, so yes, joy. Joy is a form of resistance. And as I was walking through the Old North End where I live, whoever is the fantastic human that keeps writing these out on every crosswalk, and luckily we haven't had very much rain, so they don't disappear very much. But I just want to shout out, if that person is sitting in this room, thank you, because you give me joy at least 3 times a day. And just before we get started, in terms of our presenters, I grew up in a faith tradition where we greet people. And so if you would just take a moment and just say hi to the person sitting next to you. Excellent. Don't you feel good? Is it nice? All right. So for the last couple of years, we've had a number of sponsors. As I said, this is the volume 41, so we've been doing this 41 times, and we've been doing it for 16 years. We have had, Mascoma Bank has been our sponsor for about 5 years, and this is the last formal sponsorship from them, but we do want to thank their long-term support of this endeavor. You'll also notice that this is being recorded. Media Factory has been at the very start of supporting us and airing this. It's on YouTube, it's on their Media Factory channel. And we also have Solidarity of Unbridled Labor and 7 Days. All of these have been with us since the very beginning, so thank you. We also have foam brewers out in the lobby, so if you are not familiar with them, they are a local brewery that right down the street. Unfortunately, they close at 9, so we can't all go on, go drinking afterwards. But they will be here through intermission, so please help yourself. You have to pay, but please support local. So this is our lineup, and again, these are passions. They're not pitches. We're not selling anything. It's really just people sharing. If people could please turn off their cell phones, that would be great, so that you're not interrupting folks when they're presenting. All right. So our first presenter is going to be Kevin Donagan. His title is Crowdsourced.
You're working out the kinks.
Working out the kinks, right. Guinea pig.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh. So I'm a visual artist, and like many of us, I've crafted most of my work in solitude, and that's been awesome, but it also has its limitations. And so as a radical experiment in 2023, I began crowdsourcing analog art at a local art festival. The concept was simple. I made a sign and then invited other people to paint on it with practically no rules. I'd stop people and say, hey, do you want to paint my sign? You can't mess it up because hope will be there no matter what. This is an exciting alternative to the gallery model where viewers are generally told where to stand, what to read, and not to touch. In this case, touching was the whole point. Not only could viewers interact with the work, but they could shape its trajectory. And then I got to be a witness to the whole thing. Some folks just made a small mark before moving on, while others invested serious time and energy and just contributed amazing imagery. Dozens of people worked on it over the course of 8 hours, and then at the end, it was done. I didn't change a thing, and it was glorious. So later that year, I staged a second project at Art Hop. My approach was similar, but there were a few modifications, different word, LEDs, a little more dimensional, and it was up for 3 days. Oh, and no spray paint. I learned my lesson the first time. The children were amazing. They knew intuitively what to do. They'd see paint and brushes and white space and just go for it. Adults tended to be a little bit more hesitant, and they'd ask, like, are you sure we can paint? Like, anything? But most people caught on eventually. But I heard that some adults say, I haven't painted since 2nd grade, or I'm not an artist, but I'll give it a try. And sometimes the work was so swarmed that I couldn't see what was happening, but that just added to the excitement. And meanwhile, many talented local artists also contributed, and their cameos are all over the work. So while I started the thing, set it in motion, it really felt like this was art that had a life of its own. I just got to watch it grow while washing paintbrushes and cheerleading. I since learned that this is not a unique approach to art making. Many artists, local and international, have acted as facilitators in this way. But what's special to me is that this art is really rooted in place, in the people and culture of Burlington, which is fitting because I, too, am rooted here. I have connections and trust in this community, which underpins the work, which is not to say that it's not messy and unpredictable, but it's also colorful, diverse, and caring. For me, this work embodies all of that and vibrates with vitality. After that, I did the next logical thing and let people paint on me while wearing a white suit, cowboy hat, and custom mask. This time, I was the canvas, an artist, and participant, and witness, all in one, which was way outside my comfort zone, but was one hell of a growth opportunity. I had prepared myself for awkwardness, but was disarmed by the intimacy. Sensing the brushes on my skin, breath on my neck, and prolonged eye contact made me feel really connected to the people painting me. Some folks even asked for consent before touching, which was very sweet. Ironically, it was also strangely impersonal at times when multiple people were working on me at once. Sometimes I'd go to shift my weight and someone behind me would say, hey, I'm working on something back here. Be careful. It was exhilarating to tiptoe into performance and challenge my own conceptions of the personal and the public. It was also heartwarming to have people respond with joy, humor, surprise, and playful interaction. And now I have a fabulous outfit, which I do wear out on special occasions. And I have had people stop me on the street and be like, oh my God, I painted on you. That's my cat that I was working on. And that's just more connection. This year, the crowdsourcing continued at Art Hop. I made 4 more Paint Me sculptures. But instead of simple signs, they had a little bit more character and new ways to interact. But they still revolved around the same simple concept and very few rules. Like other projects, people showed up and jumped at the opportunity to get their hands dirty, even in the rain, which confirmed for me that almost everyone craves an opportunity to be creative, especially if it's spontaneous, loose, low stakes, and non-judgmental. And for me personally, the experience of collaborating has forever changed my process. I do still spend a lot of time alone in the studio, but now I hanker for the excitement of and energy and variety of crowdsourcing. When I'm working by myself, I sometimes think, like, where is everyone? These experiences have opened me up to other forms of collaboration and expanded the scope of my practice. They have changed my aesthetic. They've introduced me to new friends and deepened old connections. They have given me invaluable perspective on myself and my town, so they really feel like gifts. For me, these projects represent a meaningful and ongoing dialogue with the Burlington community. I've worked hard to make them happen, but feel like the effort has been repaid tenfold. When I look at this work, I think, wow, we did this. So thank you, Burlington. I couldn't have done it without you.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's a nice way to start. All right. So our next presenter is Elysia Doty. And Alicia's going to talk about her Techno-Nordic dream hat. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. Ready? My name's Elysia. I'm also a visual artist. I'm kind of an emerging artist. I got into it a couple years ago. And this is kind of my personal journey in the last, let's say, 30 years. So this is me, 30 years, about 20 years ago in my Nordic dream hat. And I just recently started calling it that. I kind of feel like it's a talisman. It's something that just kind of popped up in my house again in the last couple months. And I found it, and it brought me out of a pretty deep kind of sad depression. Like all the chaos in the world right now has really been getting to me. And then that was a picture of my kids. I have 2 adult children, and I've spent the last 25 years really focusing on being a mom and a parent and kind of losing myself in making sure that their dreams were coming true. We've zigzagged all over the East Coast. We've lived in Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York City, Vermont, Massachusetts. And finally, we got to move to Vermont about 10 years ago. And this was our dream property. And then the world kind of went chaos. And the pandemic started. I think both my kids were in high school then. And I don't know, this picture really represents how it kind of felt to me. Everything was, who knew what was going to happen. It was really isolating. And I spent the time there taking pictures and pictures of this pond just about every day in the different light. I started a daily sketchbook practice. And, I really started thinking about reconnecting with my artistic self. And then we moved back up to Burlington because we were in southern Vermont for a while, and I started working at Gardner Supply. And I think this is when the gnomes started to show up. It was hiding in one of the boxes that I was packing. It was kind of funny. And then, the world again was sort of bananas. My daughter had gone off to college, and then she had to come home for health reasons. So all of a sudden I found myself able to take a cross-country road trip. I flew out to Tahoe to pick her up, and I'd always wanted to see the Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson. I'd written a paper about it in college, and it was just a little off track for us. Of course, my 21-year-old daughter wasn't that into it, but I did manage to take a nice meditative walk out to the center of the spiral, and I swear I heard a lion roar. But when I opened my eyes, I didn't see anything. But my daughter was leaning on the horn of the car because she had refused to get out. So maybe it was just her. It was like a telepathic message from her. We got home, I got back, and then I started another new job. And by now I have 2 jobs, and I was working for an ad tech company, and it required a hell of a lot of travel. So it was airplanes, and then this is another spiral, walking up 7 flights of stairs to a conference on the 7th floor in France. And honestly, my health really started to get bad. I consider this is the breakfast of champions here. Not eating, kind of almost getting into a manic state, being in different time zones, different hotels. Back in France again, so we went from Las Vegas, Miami, New York, back to Las Vegas, Arizona, California, back to France, and this was all just for work. But this summer, I found this church, this Baroque church in a small town in France, and inside, I'm really looking for these little glimmers of hope. Inside, I found a statue of Saint Anne and a statue of Saint Joseph, who my grandmother was Anne, and my grandfather was Joseph, and it just felt like it was important to light a candle and honor them, because I felt like my angels were with me. And then I got home, and work continued, and here's a little gnome that sits on my kitchen counter, and a little pin, reminder to let that shit go. And I did eventually resign from that position to try to focus more on art. And I did my first art hop, which was a wild 3 days of lots of talking to lots of people. And now I finally have my own studio space outside of my house. And these are some of the things I think about while I'm making art. And I hope to be able to do it more. And in between all the chaos, I planted a garden this summer. And even though I wasn't here all summer, I was so happy to find this little heart-shaped tomato next to my garden gnome. And there were lots of really good tomatoes, actually. And then the hat showed up again. And this is my son. And hopefully, he's taking a little break from college, too. We're all trying to find our way in this time. And, I'm fine. He's going to take the hat. And hopefully, follow his dreams. And then this is a little sketch I made. It's my hope for, world peace, the end of endless war, peace in the Middle East, and just a quiet, reflective little gnome. And that's it.
Thank you. For those of you that are new to Vermont or Burlington or have never experienced the art hop, we've got 2 references already about the art hop. So south end of Burlington has what's called the Art District, and it's always the first weekend of September, and you've got lots of galleries and artists and food and fun and community. So. All right, our third presenter is not a stranger to the stage. He's presented before. This is Charlie Messing, and he's going to talk about the Champlain Valley Fair 2008.
Thank you. How brief this will be. Hello, everyone. Hello, friends. If I don't know you yet, hello. And if we're, for some reason, enemies, hello to you, too. But I went to the Champlain Valley Fair a number of times, and this was in 2008, so if you were 20 years old, you might be a baby in one of these pictures on somebody's shoulder. There are crowd pictures. Champlain Valley Fair used to be crazy. I wasn't here when it was, but it had hoochie-coochie dancers. People got drunk, people had fights, people got in trouble. There was gambling. Not anymore. It's a lovely day. What a beautiful day it was. And you will notice, perhaps, that there were no cell phones. None. Mr. Sausage, he had a concentric ring like the spiral jetty, but made out of sausage on his grill. And the last item on his handwritten, hand-painted sign said, "Nothing, 10 cents." So I put a dime on the counter and I said, "I'll take one." And he nodded to me, took the money. Yes, you'll see the crowd. Here's the crowd. Everybody's ready to see the fair, and it's still early. To pretend to go up and down in Pharaoh's boat. Yes, this is not the most challenging ride, but an interesting ride, which I didn't go on. Some people really like to be in motion. Now here we have the Ring of Fire, and I suggest you go before lunch. As you will see in the next shot, which is actually pausing so that they can appreciate it more. And as I say, you don't go after lunch. So there were so many rides, and some of them were really wild. And these people are getting ready to go up in the air on this fabulous thing that I will describe as we see more of it. I cannot recall the name. It wasn't tilt-a-whirl, but it was like an advanced kind of thing. They're waiting to go up 60 feet and all of a sudden be dropped to 2 feet above the ground. They like that. And they're securely strapped in also. Yes. Now, we get to this thing. It's got branches. This is one branch. It's got 15 people on one side, 15 people on the other side. And not only does their branch rotate, but it is on a tripod, and the tripod rotates. And it's on a giant arm, so that they're 70 feet in the air, and the arm rotates, covers quite a distance, and so the arm rotates, and then the tripod rotates, and each of the branches rotate. I could not believe this thing. You would have a hard time convincing me to get on this thing. Perhaps you couldn't, no matter what you did. It's just one of those things where you hit it and you figure you're going to ring the bell. So the whole theme of this picture is like, hit it harder. Everybody has to hit it harder than they think. And no matter how hard they hit it, it doesn't ding. Ah, yes, another pre-lunch ride. You go around in a spiral, go up and down, and boy, they like that. I like the Ferris wheel. Now here's in the big top, you got a woman hanging and twisting on a silken rope, a silken blanket kind of thing, and she's smiling like crazy. And she's athletic as hell. And everybody's thinking, oh God. And now this is Thomas the Tank Engine and one of his big fans. He's delighted to be so close to Thomas the Tank Engine that he's been reading about for years. And Thomas doesn't look all that real. Now this is a real tiger at the fair. The tiger is very patient. He's calm. He's waiting someday to go where he can go be a tiger and run. And this, if you have deadly accuracy or spend enough quarters, until you finally hit something, you will get one of these worthless items. Yes, they're big, and hopefully they will stimulate more and more and more and more quarters. The art on this spook house. This is a ride inside. It's all dark inside, so they have the wall. And there's the good old devil. You wondered what he looked like? That's what he looked like. And this, some people waiting, thinking about going in, and you can see the queen of the fair. What I think of as the queen of the fair, and she's so lovely, so well painted. I was entranced, and I hope everyone else who saw her was. It was really nice, and I didn't eat a whole blooming onion, for instance. Impossible to finish one. And I got out. That was it. Without cell phones, and the Champlain Valley Fair is still there. You should attend anytime you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Everyone's hankering now for a onion bloom. All right. So we've got two more before our intermission. We have Paul Henninge, who is going to be speaking about communication, a love tragedy.
Go ahead. My name is Paul Henninge, and I like to take photographs and integrate communications into them. Not always photographs, but I integrate these visual images, and I do it for contrast, or I'm trying to make a social statement. I've been doing this a long time. Back in the last century, I was using film, and I was taking a photography class, and I came across this political campaign, and of course I don't have to point out the mistakes of the stencil work and the unfortunate last name, but I just sat there with my camera, and I composed, and I waited for the next pickup truck to come over the hill. My first trip in Europe, of course, the signs are silly, and I'm silly too because I don't understand them. But in Europe, they use the triangles for a warning sign, and squares and rectangles are reserved for information. Red is the alert color. Here in North America, we're accustomed to using the yellows. I call it taxi cab yellow. I mean, what kind of guy takes a selfie of his bride like this on his wedding day, right? But we have 3 of these speed tables on Pine Street, but nobody really knows what they are, and they're not even labeled. But anyone could put yellow on a sign, but it doesn't really. Maybe it should have a warning kind of designation if it's with all the gas lines, or you know, the irony of the 2 other signs. I just can't drive past this stuff without photographing it, you know? When my mother passed away, I went into the pantry, and my mom was a nervous Nelly kind of character, and she really cooked bland food. So when I came across this thing of hot peppers and saw her handmade label, I had to document for prosperity. I mean, don't even breathe. Now, it's not just signs. I'm taking pictures of monitors or CCTV images because, you know, I'm not going to I got to take a little ownership over my likeness. Here it says recording in progress. And now, from what I've read, that has to be stated when they actually broadcast your image. They're allowed to record the whole time they want to, if it's their property or it's a public space. Now, if it's a private space, like a changing room or a bathroom, you're going to want to make sure you get permission before you even start to photograph or record anything. Now, so you can imagine how I felt the next image. And I was just enthralled with this beautiful purple, brown, textured, you know, this was from a 1940s institutional setting. And the tri-colored yellow, beautiful typography with the little serifs. It was really pretty. Had to document it. My daughter's 15 or 16 here, and she's right at the end of her princess phase, and I probably fought that too much. And I see that, you know, what she orders, and I pick this up, and I'm like, how much did this cost? And I'm taking a picture of it. And she would never let me take a picture at this age of her, but I kind of like the result. Now, I'm not a Gen Zer. I don't really get the fuzzies thing or the furry animals. I apologize if I offend anyone. So I saw this trio walking down Main Street. I'm in my car zooming in on my phone like, oh my God, this is so funny. And then I had to wait until they got in front of the comedy club, of course, before I snapped off the picture. Saw this jalopy of a car in a parking lot, and there's this really cool emblem on it, and I zoom into it. And, you know, when something has to kind of state how important it is, it loses its credentials, doesn't it? I mean, this thing was neither a collector nor an edition. Conversely, in Quebec City, there's a fashion store, and I kind of like it when something spoofs or makes fun of what its own endeavor is. La mode is fashion in French, and that shows a little humanity to me. You know, it earns its respect to some degree. Now, not all communications are meant for the moment that you actually read them. Some are reserved for special moments. This is in an elevator. And I'd never noticed this before, and I thought, well, geez, that's for claustrophobic people. That's going to make them calm down. It's to placate them. But I'm not sure a red flashing light is necessarily the way to go about it. Now, this has all sorts of things wrong with it. I'm glad you find it funny. But I want you to pay special attention to the punctuation because it's special. Now read it to yourself. I think the sign does the opposite of what its intention is. Don't you all want to just push that button? Now, we don't need absolutely do not. Now we have this symbol, the prohibition symbol. And that was sort of invented around the late 20s in Europe. And then it became normalized in the 80s when the computer technology was really young. And you know, when your trusted steed in the early years was like sickened by bad software or something, it had to take every last breath it could just to get out the most minimal image. And I'm really heartened to see that actually is still the case today, because I think there's a little humanity somewhere in there. Now, when I first saw this police car, I assure you it was very far away. And thank you very much, but now it looks very close, and I don't like the mirror telling me it's in fact closer than what it appears. Some communications get messed with and defaced, and I took a picture of this concrete wall. The letter no, or the word no is gone, and I think what I'm trying to say here is sometimes it's the very audience that the sign is intended for or is trying to communicate about that defaces the sign. And I don't want to fall into that category, but my last name is a little weird, so if I see something that comes remotely close, I'm going to take advantage of this communication and make it mine.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. How's everyone doing? Yay! Do you have a little more joy than you did before you walked in here? So, excellent. All right, so we have one more before our intermission. And you ready, Linda? Excellent.
This is for you, Judy.
All right. All right. Okay. You're good? Okay. All right, so Linda Moran, Classroom Follies, 30 years in public schools across the country.
And I'm still here. Okay, we are ready. Yeah, I never wanted to be a teacher. Furthest thing from my mind. But at my graduation, I was the first person in my graduating class to have a job in March of that year as a teacher, which I didn't want. But as my poli-sci professor said to me, Miss Lemke, how bad can it be teaching in Hawaii? Well, he did have a point. And you'll see this is my high school, Baldwin High School in Wailuku, Maui. Great place, 6,000 miles from home, middle of the Pacific. Great community, great mentors, because I did not have a clue as to what I was doing. So it was just a wonderful place to start. But man, did I learn lessons. To get to that school, I had to get through student teaching. And twice during my student teaching experience, it was suggested that I look for something else for a career. So yeah, the old civics books and my second day of student teaching, I'm talking about jails and prisons. And you know, in methods classes, they always say, get the kids involved. So it was like, anybody here been in jail? Hand goes up. And you know, the lawyers say, never ask a question you don't know the answer to ahead of time. I said, oh, what'd you go to jail for? Statutory rape. So like I said, I had no clue. Walk into class with this on the board. My big high school football players are sitting there. And it's like, oh my God, don't let my principal walk in. What do I do with this? I don't know. So I go up and I erase the O, and I put the U in, and I turn to them and say, if you're going to use it, at least spell it correctly. I got involved with the faculty, with the students. This was a pep rally, and you may remember going to pep rallies that teachers would perform. My knees have not worked like that in decades, decades. But it was a great place to learn. And I had wonderful, wonderful students. My second year, one of the students came up to me. We had a group called the Asian and Pacific Affairs Council. And she said, we want to do something this year because we're still in Vietnam. What can we do? I said, well, let's think about it. So from September to April, we planned on World Peace Day. And the kids arranged for students to come in from other islands. We just had a great big gathering. It was wonderful. The second year, they said, well, what should we do now? So they came up with the UN Model Environmental Conference, which was great. It hadn't been done that. And again, in the middle of a teacher strike, no less, we had students from around the islands coming in to participate. We had a terrorist attack at the end. The kids neglected to tell me that that was going to happen. I was not happy. I was involved with the Maui Community Theater, and we did The Lion in Winter. And the theater decided, well, since it's a historical play, let's put it on at the high school that you teach at. So there I am, well, there I was, walking out on stage, and they know it's me. And you heard, ooh. And then when the king started to kiss me, it was like, oh my God, it's the teacher, look at that. And the kid running the lights was just too busy laughing to give me the blackout. This is here at Camel's Hump. That's Big Bird. That was a lot of, what do you call it? Yes, thank you. And chicken wire. And I actually wore that to the Kentucky Fried Chicken in Essex Junction on Halloween one year. Okay, getting in and out of my Volkswagen was a little difficult. But I loved the theater. You saw two pictures back there, Music Man and Peter Pan. And if you've been in those shows and you've grown up over the last decade, please let me know. This theater versus sports thing became important. You play baseball, okay, you have a game every week or so. You do a play, it's 8 weeks. And the teachers would say, well, they're out of class for 5 days, 5 performances. Why do you do so many? Well, you don't practice all baseball season and then have one game. So it was a lot of getting people to realize it's not an either or. Kids need both. Along the way, I picked up some foster students. This is a Richmond boy. I've known him since 6th grade. He is now teaching English in Vietnam. And I get Mother's Day cards, and he calls me Mama. And I have a bunch of kids, most of them around in this area because I've spent a lot of time here. Whenever I would travel with my husband, I was always snapping pictures because you never knew when one of those would help you teach a lesson a little better. This bombed. Told my students, we're going to go on a field trip today. So we go outside, and they say, where's the bus? And I'll say, well, we're here. Well, where's here? I said, we're on the Earth. It's a planet spinning in space. And I was giving them all these numbers and stuff. They could care less. I finished my career at Tucson High School, magnet school, 3,000 students, 16 active gangs, most of which were neighborhood organizations. Very safe school, and I loved it. Check the video on YouTube for TUSD, Tucson High Magnet School. Great place. I loved it. Now, this was a t-shirt from the first Tucson Book Festival. And periodically I'd wear my t-shirts on Friday, but I always had a blouse over it. And I had the one student who said, Miss, can I ask a question? I said, is it about math, Conrad? Well, sort of. Okay. So he said, Miss, is that word on your t-shirt vagina? I couldn't help but laugh. I said, no, Conrad, it's imagination. But you just never know. And I said to him, yes, it's funny, but it's really inappropriate, as I'm still giggling. The previous slide was I figured I spent 35 24-hour days over my career marking papers. Okay, if you're going to use tools with kids, especially 3rd graders, know what they do. We were going to be making something with plaster of Paris, and I figured, I'll get this ready ahead of time. Wrong. You don't make plaster of Paris up 4 hours before you're going to need it. And then my favorite guy, Fred Rogers, who said, always look for the helpers. And I got to tell you, one of the things I came to realize after all those years of teaching is that we are first responders as teachers. We may not go into burning buildings or fight fires, but we're there when your kids need answers to questions. Even though we may still be trying to process something, we're there for them. And that's probably what I like the most about having been a teacher. Thank you.
Linda, there wasn't a real terrorist attack. It was at the Model UN that they had a terrorist attack. Is that true? Yes. The kids it was a simulated terrorist attack. So if you didn't hear about that terrorist attack in the 1970s, that's why. It was the UN model. So we have socials of what we do if you want to check out some of our former volumes on our social media. And if you want to present, if you're inspired, our next one is coming up in March, so you got plenty of time to think about what your topic is going to be, or you can pitch something. Go ahead and we've got foam out in the lobby. We're always looking for more volunteers and presenters. And again, the program's up here if you want to figure out who was it that was talking. So we'll take about 15 minutes, schmooze, hang out with the folks that have their 640 t-shirt on, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. All right, let's get started. I want to thank our photographer, Kristen. And again, if you are enjoying this, you can actually see 40 other volumes of PechaKucha on the Media Factory YouTube page. And as I said, this is a volunteer I guess we're an organization officially, right, Joel? It's a volunteer endeavor. If you know somebody that would just love to be our sponsor financially, that would be great. If you want to donate us $5, we would love that. So just want to put that out there, that any help that you give us financially, or if you want to present, we welcome you. So thank you, Joel. Joel's doing a great job. Thank you. All right, so our second half, we've got 5 presenters, and we're going to start with Mark. Mark Stephenson's going to talk about time travel in the Arctic.
Or what I did on my summer vacation. I'm very happy to be presenting today because I finally found a use for these note cards that are in my drawer. I have some extras if anybody wants any. 2,000 years before Christ, human hands picked up these stones and placed them here to create a sign for future travelers. We stumbled upon this landmark on our trip. It was the only sign we would see on our journey, historic or modern. The journey, after 2 years of planning, the float plane landed north of the Arctic Circle on the Hornaday River system. The journey began in 1980 with a trip across Hudson Bay to the Arctic. The remote and the untamed wilderness amidst the beauty of the landscape, your day-to-day is reduced to basic survival. This basic shelter protected us from the wind, rain, and the sun. Your possessions are reduced to only basic objects, including lawn chairs. There are no roads, no fences. The river is your highway. The canoe is your vehicle, and the map and compass your guide. The water is pure and clean. You can dip your cup in and drink it. The surface is crystal clear. The river is bountiful. The fish are healthy and good to eat. Imagine a river full of trout and grayling that had never seen a lure or a fly before. There are no campgrounds. There's no shelters. You're outside 24/7. When it rains, you get wet, and you travel on. The tapestry of color reflects the diversity of nature in a pristine environment, and some of it's pretty good to eat. Wolf track, caribou print. Tracking is the oldest skill known to humankind. You learn to hunt and you learn to not be hunted. The Hornaday River system is home to the Blue-Nosed Caribou herd calving grounds. It was used for food, shelter, and clothing by the native people. Caribou were around us everywhere. This 4,000-year-old site included many stone tent circles and food caches, which was the predecessor to the corner grocery store. We also found 2 wooden sled runners that were about 100 years old. They were relics of the last generation to travel with the herd. North American safari, the wolf, the caribou, muskox, the grizzly, and the wolverine. They traveled amongst us, they walked amongst us daily. The length of the trip was equivalent from here to Boston. Every day, we broke camp, we packed our canoe, and we traveled lined portage and paddle down the river. We approached this prospective campsite, and ptarmigan burst from the bushes around us. As we lay in camp that night in our tents, a curious fox came up to our tent and got a view of the visitors. These tundra swan feathers line this beautiful nest and warm the yet unborn eggs. We take time to reflect, to fish, and to hike, and to enjoy great food and each other's company. The greatest part of this journey was to get to share this landscape with my 2 sons, Cody and Clark. To witness them earning the perspective, I get cut out. For them to earn the perspective and the confidence that goes along with such a trip. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Cool purple belt, too. I like that. All right. So Charlie had talked about tigers at the Champlain Valley Fair. Willow Hecht is going to be talking about tigers that she has known in another setting. So welcome, Willow.
Now can you hear me? Yes. Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. Should I start? Yeah? All right. This is a story about how big cats saved my life. I've been lucky enough to make my passion for big cats and more broadly animal rescue my actual day job. So most of the photos you're going to see tonight are of animals I consider my friends. I am a cat person, and I come from a family of cat people. In the fall of 2006, I happened to read a letter in the back of Glamour magazine written by a man trying to defend his wife's fashion choices after Glamour had published this photo of a woman in head-to-toe mismatched leopard print. She was a fashion don't. That's what they said in the magazine. This woman was Carol Baskin, the founder of Big Cat Rescue, which at the time was the largest big cat sanctuary in the world with 125 cats of 16 different species. You may recognize her name from the Netflix documentary Tiger King, which is a whole different story for another day. I looked up Big Cat Rescue online, having no idea, like many of you might not, that there are thousands of big cats in backyards, basements, circuses, and roadside zoos across the country, and that a handful of accredited sanctuaries rescues them and takes care of them for the rest of their lives if they're really lucky. Big Cat Rescue's videos made me cry. These beautiful animals who were being abused, starved, and neglected were brought to this Tampa, Florida paradise where they had all the specialized care they needed. I became obsessed. At the time, I was 26 years old and had been disabled and largely bedridden from an illness for the previous 6 years from an illness called chronic fatigue syndrome. This illness had stopped my life in its tracks and turned it upside down at the age of 19. I was unable to work or drive or walk or really function much at all in the early years, and I spent most of my time sleeping in my room at my mom's apartment. I saw the Big Cat Rescue videos of the cats and I thought, well, I feel like crap all the time already. I might as well feel like crap down in a tropical paradise surrounded by big cats. So 6 months later, I moved to Florida. I did not have a job there. I did not know anybody there, and I had no experience taking care of big cats. I started volunteering at Big Cat Rescue a couple hours a week. I started as a trainee keeper, cleaning small cat cages in the morning and then sleeping in the afternoon. And I eventually worked my way up to being a senior keeper, taking care of the biggest cats, feeding them, giving them medications. I became paid staff. I directed the education department. I lived on the property. And my favorite thing to do was to make enrichment for the cats, which is basically toys. Stimulates their minds in captivity and natural behaviors. I ended up running the enrichment committee for 3 years there as well. The ethos at Big Cat Rescue was basically 100% devotion to the cats at the expense of the rest of your life. So nobody cared that I was sick. I was expected to come and perform. I ate, slept, and breathed Big Cat Rescue. There was a time when I would have given my life to protect these cats. It was a bit cultish, I realize now. But if I didn't show up, the cats didn't eat, they didn't get fresh water, they didn't get medication. That's a big responsibility. We'd be out there in the torrential Florida downpour, in the hurricane, in the pitch dark with water up to our knees and flashlights, making sure those cats had a dry space to sleep and be out of the rain by moving their den boxes up there. Every night my duty was to make sure that the lock on the gate to the sanctuary was closed after everyone left the property for the day. So some days I would just stumble out there in my pajamas, so tired. I could barely think straight, but I never left that lock unlocked. Big cats are incredibly beautiful and fascinating. They're very silly, like house cats, but they have that lethality underlying everything they do. They control the interaction, and they know it. You don't control it. They're really on another plane emotionally, also, that humans can't understand. They're very sensitive. They're very intelligent. My favorites, as you might have guessed, were the tigers. What an improbable animal. A giant orange striped cat that likes to swim and has paws the size of your head and the strength of 13 men. There's nothing more beautiful and terrifying. That's the ultimate killing machine. Okay. And the cats choose you. You don't choose them, no matter how much you might love them from afar. There's nothing you can do to change their minds about you. but what an honor it was to be chosen. And I was lucky enough to be chosen by a few. After I left Big Cat Rescue at the end of 2014, I got a master's degree in animal welfare science, and I've worked with rescued animals in Peru, Colombia, Spain, and South Africa. I currently work in the captive animal law enforcement department of PETA, where we file lawsuits to shut down the shady facilities and rescue all the animals from each one. I also got long COVID. So on top of the symptoms I already have, I now have a whole new batch of them. But I keep going because in the moments between the fatigue and the dizziness and the nausea, there is this. The only thing that really can get me out of bed, no matter how much I pay for it the next day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Willow. It was beautiful. How many of you watched Tiger King during COVID? True confessions, right? So our next speaker actually has a couple things out in the lobby if you want to check those out after the show. I also believe she made banana bread or pumpkin bread. If you want to grab some of that too. So Suzanne Stimik is going to be talking about kindness of strangers.
All right, can you hear me? Perfect. All right. I believe in something so totally ordinary, the kindness of strangers. We all experience those grace notes when somebody reaches out with their compassion or their help, and it just shows up that we are all tethered together. As luck would have it, this May, I flew out to the motherlode. I went to the Midwest to a graduation in Wisconsin and then on to Chicago. Everybody there, you feel like you're going to trip over, is so kind. And my last few days, I felt like I had a need. I wanted to document their kindness. I wanted to find the hope that it gave me and have it come back. So gave myself rules. I would await a connection that was random, engage, and then I would take a photograph and share the snapshot. Some of these connections lasted minutes and some hours. On a long Chicago bus ride, our laughter caught this family's attention. The son shared his proud parents were in America for his graduation and had never been here before. The mother spoke zero English, but we had a long bus ride and he translated. In 5 years, he would return to India for an arranged marriage. And my stop, she stood up, crossed the bus, hugged me, looked up and said, "I love you." Now, did she think that meant have a nice day? Or I'm hoping that she thinks it meant come to the wedding in 5 years in India. On our last day in Chicago, we were a little early for the institute, the Art Institute, members only. So I approached Terry, the guard, and asked, could we purchase our tickets a little bit early? Because we had to fly out. He disappeared in the museum, and he returned beaming. He had procured for us tickets to the show, tickets to the Frida Kahlo show, and free lunch vouchers. I said, why? And he said, I just felt like I wanted to be nice to you. Then it was off to the subway, which I don't love. On the subway, we studied the map directions really carefully. We read the signage, and then to be extra certain, we approached the ticket booth where Jesse was working. He looked up and said, well, you look smart. And he struggled from his seat and walked with a lot of difficulty. And he brought us right to the correct track, at which point I took his picture and he said, I can't wait to show these off. At the airport, all bets were off. Out the gate was a sandstorm that was blinding. Out the other gate was amid tornado warnings, was cats and dogs raining down. Our Burlington pilots were there. Felix was on one side, and I called the other Oscar. They were stranded, and all the monitors flashed delay. I was scared. I don't like to fly, but Myrna stood out. She was beautiful, and she was calm. So she led us from fear completely into calm and trust. She's a physics teacher, but she had been a flight attendant. She and I continued talking. We talked, of course, for hours then, but we continued texting, and she knows tonight I'm going to talk about her, and she's really thrilled and honored to be part of this. She went to her nephew's graduation a few days later. You never know where a connection leads. She's going to come visit next summer in Vermont. I can't wait to host her. I love Facebook Marketplace shopping. I've learned about this. No better place than at the base of Mount Willow. So I'll set the scene. I'm buying a canary yellow chair and ottoman. I marvel that Hannah squished those into her car. She's on her way to Australia to move, because they wouldn't fit in my car. 5 ladies hiked by, and they said, "We love the marigold yellow." We couldn't do it. 2 men joined in. They ended up taking the legs off. We're now 8 people to try and put this in my car. It didn't work. So 8 people doesn't work. Somebody said there's a pickup truck. And emerging from the truck is John, who you'll see in a second. He says, "I'm going up to Burlington to price chopper. Bingo." He tosses it in, takes off his shirt, which he then put on, to protect the chair from his truck bed. Mission accomplished. Both furniture and kindness were delivered right to my door. Now, next is a collage of photos. Anthony shared his favorite poetry that spoke of kindness. Laurent, you'll see later, is this amazing human being who emigrated to Burlington through Italy 40 years ago from Romania. Amazing story. And last month at a Portland restaurant, waiting in line for the bathroom, out emerges this wacky, crazy genie with a maniacal look in her eyes. She says, "Come in!" And she drags 5 of us into the bathroom and says, "Listen, it speaks. It's the foaming soap dispenser." And it did. It said, "What the hell, man?" I have video. You really can hear it. We hear that social connection ranks higher than diet or exercise or clean air for longevity and well-being. Well, studies also show that the highest is the incidental social connection, the weak tie that's made outside of your regular social connections. They tether us together in a way that teaches empathy. And it's really important because we now live in a fractured world. If our lives could intersect more with strangers and with kindness, do you think we could bridge some of our dangerous polarization? I think it's worth a try. Much in life right now feels big and difficult, but a smile and an open heart and taking a lot of time just finds a kind stranger, at which point the ordinary really becomes the extraordinary. I believe, frankly, it's a way to resist. Jeannie and Jacob stay in touch. They're getting married in Ireland tomorrow, and they're going to come visit me from Indianapolis looking for more soap dispensers. I really thank you for listening, and if any of this resonates with you about the kindness of a stranger, seek me out because I want to keep this going. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right. I don't know that Nat's going to explain his T-shirt. However, I like that, damaged goods. Okay, Nat Woodward is going to be speaking. You are here.
Thank you. Microphone check. I wore this for you, Michael. We going? All right. So in the last century, I was invited to make a map. I was pretty excited because I love maps. I grew up without a TV, but I did have a 3-foot by 2-foot map from National Geographic of the United States. The map would be featuring a festival, and it would have to have a stage, and it would have to have some campgrounds. I looked at the past maps and started to ponder. I followed suit for the most part. When you do this stuff, you get a giant CAD file, which is like an engineering thing that I trace in Illustrator, and eventually came up with my first map. So I do this a couple more times, and eventually there's this thing that it's all going to come to an end, and it's got to be really special. And this show is going to be in Vermont, in this old town, Coventry. So I want to make it special, and I'm like, special Vermont old town map. That's Googling. And I come up with these antique maps from the Library of Congress, which is a place that in 1999 I pillaged often from for design jobs because it was royalty-free and high-res, and clip art was terrible. But I fell in love with this stuff, and I wanted it to be like that. And I needed like a private helicopter ride over Coventry to get this view, although really I wanted to quit everything and learn how to make one of these things for real in lithography. I would learn years later that my grandfather actually drew views of these things himself from Bunker Hill of Boston. Looked just like this stuff. So I decide I'm working at a design shop, and I know upstairs there's this company that does a thing called GPS. And I know that the guy upstairs is a fan, and I go up there and I talk to him about it, and he tells me how it all kind of works, and I buy this picture from the state of Vermont, and it shows up in the mail of the general area that I'm interested in. And I bring it to him, and he loads it up in his weird old software and the stuff that I've never seen. It wasn't old back then. That was a misspeak. It was brand new. We had never seen it. And he lets me navigate around Coventry and sort of try to find a way to see how this layout is and where the venue's going to be and all this other stuff. So I ended up doing this crazy Photoshop job with all these old maps and lots of layering and compositing. I had a Power Mac 7100 and took 45 minutes for each save. It was terrifying. There were a lot of tears. So this kind of became a thing for me, and I made a few more maps. But after this period, maybe 2 years later, actually Google Earth launched. And Google Earth made it so I no longer had to go hire the guy with the funny GPS system, and I could kind of navigate around and figure out, how I wanted to approach this thing and do my panoramic map view, as these things were called. So then the band comes back. The shows are getting more complicated. They're getting larger. There's more information. There's more stuff people want. It's really about a stage. That's where we're going to. And where you're camping. I need to get back to my tent. So for me, like these flat maps that we'd been doing were really not ever effective. I always felt like I need to have a sense of where I am. The stage is true north. So you get these properties in these spaces, and they're very spread out. They're very odd. And my main goal is really, where is the stage? How do you make it the center? How do you get everything framed up in a piece of paper that you can reasonably hold? Which is still around 11 by 17. Like, you can only hold your arm so far. And then there's also the reality. The venue itself, actually, you can fit 12 of them inside a racetrack. And yet the venue has to look like the biggest and most important thing. Like, that's true north. That's where we're headed. So I load up the CAD file inside of Google Earth, and I spin around, and I try to find some kind of horizontal friendly view that captures all the pieces of land where campsites are going to happen, and then mostly has the venue in the center. The problem with this is that the venue, again, is super small. So I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to hide the lies? I've started off completely truthful. Now we got to lie. the venue area needs to be big. So I get this artwork, and I'm like, aha, it'll be a spaceship coming down onto Earth, and that will give me the freedom to break from scale and lie a little bit in between certain areas of interest and such. And so that becomes my template. And I spend time exploring it. I trace over it. I've used a lot of automated tools. You end up with a lot of noise. But you really just have to fill in the stuff, and you've got a map. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Did people know there's this band called Fish that came out of Vermont? Nectar's quietly closed this week, by the way, for those of you that have been in Burlington long enough, 50 years. Quietly closed. All right, so our illustrious volunteer, Michael Jager, is our last presenter tonight. And he is going to speak about Passion for the Passion of, PSA from Joan, Carl, and my mother.
How's that? Yeah. Good? All right. Cool. Now you can see how I don't normally sound like a squeaky Leonard Cohen or anything. That's not my normal voice, but I'm dealing with a bit of a scrappy throat. But anyway, I wanted to thank the PechaKucha team. This just does not happen overnight. Bringing the community together like this and having a relationship with the presenters and so on, it's kind of a miracle that it happens. And I want you're actually all part of a public service by doing this, because what we do when we show up like this and actually participate, we're putting a dent in this. This is what's happening. Ultimately, we want to get it to this. But I just wanted to share the thanks to the team. I guess the joy for me, the joy dimension of this presentation is really about the fact that we can put a dent in this, but it's by showing up. If you don't show up in your community, you don't have much of a right to complain about it. So anyway, thanks for the moment. All right, so let's go ahead and party. All right, well, so as a young boy, growing up 30 miles from here on a small farm, my young mother actually suffered from depression pretty severely, to the point at which she was actually in the state hospital for nearly 2 years. When she came home, she found solace in something that was really interesting, which was cinema and film. She could transport herself in film. And she took me on those journeys. And this was like before the Black Mirror action that we have, where you're not streaming films and all this stuff. It was like, Michael, Ben-Hur's going to be on at midnight on Sunday. We need to have tea and watch that. Or Terrence Malick on Tuesday night, Badlands is going to be showing. And I got completely captured by film and the importance of that art form and the cinematic art form. Because it is about truth and human story. The images that you're seeing here are from a film called The Passion of Joan of Arc. This film was made 100 years ago next year. It's a silent film. These images are from 100 years ago. The director, Charles Theodor Dreyer, or Carl Theodor Dreyer, was a Danish director. He's absolutely brilliant. And he had the vision for this film. And his director of photography, who was Rudolf Maté, they were a partnership that then connected with the person that you just saw, René Falconetti, who created a peerless role as Joan of Arc. What's amazing about this is this film is actually, it's based on true events. It's very important to keep that in mind. This is not some fabricated story. Joan of Arc was a real person. It was a real thing. The truth in this film is it was based on the transcripts from the court case and the trial. So there's no script. The script is actually the exchange between Joan of Arc and the interrogators. And it's very important to keep that in mind. What was going on was she had been betrayed basically by King Charles VII, who she had won the crown for because she heard visions from God. She talked to saints and angels, and she heard God's voice. And she basically saved France and brought him to power, and this guy basically abandoned her. So at that point, a teenage, illiterate farm girl who helped to end the 100 Years' War between France and England ends up being in the middle of an abusive power struggle between politics and religion. 17 years old, illiterate, and she's threatened with torture, coerced, forged paperwork, attempted rape, like insanity, absolute abuse of power, to the point that they finally broke her. And she couldn't even sign her name, and she marked a paper. They held her hand and marked a paper that said she denied her voices and she denied her faith. That night, she completely just broke down, and she couldn't accept that reality. She had been sentenced to perpetual life in prison. She couldn't deal with it, and she was like, I would rather die than deny my voices and the belief that I have. So she actually redressed in men's clothing, and that's one of the things. She was actually being tried because of being a religious heretic and a blasphemous woman who dressed in men's clothing and cut her hair like a man. That was part of the problem. So Kucha, who is played here by Eugene Sylvain, amazing. He immediately saw the opportunity to say, okay, so you want to, so he immediately puts it into motion that she's going to be killed the next day and burned at the stake as a relapsed heretic. The thing that is, just look at these images. Can you believe the power of these images and the truth of it? One of the things about this film is everything, 95% of the film is close-up human images. It's all expressed through faces and body language. Very little is shown of the set, though there was a huge set of the prison she was in, Rouen. They barely showed it. Look at this. Dreyer actually believed that Renee Falconetti was reincarnate Joan of Arc. He believed that that was the case. The thing that's important here is that this is about truth. It is art and expression of truth. One of the things that happened, this was so truthful, this film was shown in Copenhagen in 1926. The public had an incredible reaction to it, very powerful. The French government also, and the church, had a powerful reaction. They were not into it. They were being damned for what they did 500 years later. And they came in, memento mori. What you are, we once were. What we are, you will become. This was just before the execution in the film. One of the most powerful memento mori cinematic images ever made. So Dreyer ends up, they come in and they censor the film, cut it to ribbons. Ruined it, basically, to the point that Dreyer didn't even want the film shown. There was no truth left, no human story left. And then, shockingly, a couple of months later, a fire happened and the actual print was burned. Can you imagine that? How did that happen? But Dreyer, wiser still, this image is important actually, because it's actually a portrait of the people just before the execution is about to happen. It's a powerful cinematic image, but it's a kind of a portrait of empathy, sympathy, but also apathy. Somehow, we get convinced that the abuse of power is something we can't do anything about. And how is it possible that people could stand there and watch a 19-year-old woman burned alive because of abuse of power? And we still do stupid shit like that. This is a horrific reality. And one of the things that is great, that's a saving grace in this, is that Dreyer, wiser still, 60 years later, so 1926, leap ahead to 1986, there's reels that are found in an asylum in Oslo, Norway. He had made a print of his director's cut. That's what you're seeing. These images are art and truth transcending bullshit and lies. So these images are public domain. They're incredibly powerful. If you've not seen this film, it's important that you do. There's Jenny Holzer is an artist that I really adore. She makes a comment about abuse of power comes as no surprise. And my mother made a comment to me that always stuck with me is like, never let apathy enter your heart. And that is the truth that we need to protect. We have got to protect art and freedom of thought and vision and truth. And you guys are doing it by showing up. You're fighting apathy. So watch Passion of Jonah.
Thank you so much, Michael. All right, can we have just a round of applause for all 10 of our presenters? Thank you very much. And again, I want to encourage all of you, if you feel like you have a story or a passion that you want to share with us. I also want to thank our sponsors again. And Media Factory. Thank you, Adam, and the crew. Foam is closed and they've left the lobby, but you can visit them again later at your earliest convenience. Just a reminder, all of our PechaKucha presentations, the last 40 volumes, are up on the Media Factory webpage. There is a YouTube channel, so please check those out, including the ones tonight. They will be up in probably a month or so, 2 months, a couple weeks. There you go. Again, we're always taking volunteers, we're always taking presenters, we're always taking donations. So, and you can subscribe to our newsletter so you can find out what we're doing next. Our next presentation isn't until March. I do want to thank my crew again, Heather, Michael, Karen, Joel, Adam. Did Robin make it? Is Robin here? Okay. Yes, thank you. And then the next, March 12th, we'll be back here. So enjoy, be safe, drink lots of water, and have lots of joy.